There's a silence more powerful than thunder. A silence that doesn't scream, but dominates. It doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. This isn't the silence of ignorance or weakness. It's the silence of strategy, of calculation, of control. A silence that wins wars, topples empires, dismantles kings and presidents, not with force, but with absence. With the space between words. Think about that. What if the most powerful move in any game, politics, war, business, life, wasn't to speak louder, but to speak less? What if the smartest player in the room is the one who says nothing at all? Before we go any further, subscribe to our channel for more philosophical insights. Let's get started. Enter Niccolò Machiavelli, the man whose name alone stirs unease. He didn't believe in fair play. He believed in winning. Not in the sanitized, sportsmanlike sense, but in the raw, unfiltered reality of political survival. For Machiavelli, winning meant staying in power, outmaneuvering enemies, and doing whatever the moment required. And central to that was restraint. He understood that victory wasn't always about force or clever rhetoric, it was often about the ability to stay quiet, to let others reveal themselves, to withhold until the opportune moment. In his world, information was ammunition, and the less you gave, the more you had. To speak was to risk exposure. To remain silent was to hold the upper hand. He lived in a brutal, volatile era where a poorly timed word could trigger a coup, or worse. So he trained his attention not just on what rulers said, but on what they chose not to. And in that silence, he saw power at its purest. In The Prince, Machiavelli famously stated, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." This quote has been dissected, quoted out of context, twisted into caricature. But what's rarely discussed is what Machiavelli left unsaid. He wasn't merely endorsing tyranny. He was outlining a form of control based on psychological dominance, one that required careful self-regulation. Because fear, unlike love, doesn't require constant maintenance. It demands distance, mystery, and unpredictability. And that mystery is born in silence. Machiavelli saw how rulers ruin themselves not through cowardice, but through overexposure, saying too much, revealing their strategies, pandering for approval. Silence gave them plausible deniability. It gave them the ability to pivot, manipulate, and deceive without contradiction. In silence, they were free to become whatever the moment demanded. Words, after all, can be turned against you. Silence, wielded with discipline, cannot. Look at Cesare Borgia, Machiavelli's model for power. This wasn't a man who announced his intentions. He didn't broadcast his next move. He acted. With force, with grace, with timing so precise it left his rivals stunned. He was charismatic enough to inspire loyalty, ruthless enough to destroy opposition, and strategic enough to remain opaque. Cesare was the embodiment of Machiavellian silence, not passive, but calculated. When the situation called for charm, he delivered. When it called for blood, he spilled it. But always with restraint. He understood that information, like power, must be managed. By saying little, he created fear, not just of what he might do, but of what no one could predict. His silence wasn't just absence, it was a deliberate act, a signal of confidence, of dominance. It was the silence before the strike, the kind that keeps enemies awake at night and allies on edge. Fast forward to modern philosophy, Michel Foucault redefined how we think about power. He argued that domination isn't just about armies or governments. It's about discourse. Who gets to speak? Who stays silent? Who controls the narrative? And crucially, what happens when someone refuses to participate? In a world saturated with noise, opinions, statements, hot takes, refusing to speak becomes a radical act. Silence becomes a form of resistance. Foucault saw language not as neutral but as a battlefield. To withhold speech was to deny others the ability to frame you, define you, trap you in their vocabulary. When you don't speak, you can't be misunderstood. You can't be misquoted. You rob your opponents of leverage. And in that void, you become something else entirely, unreadable, uncontrollable. Not part of the story, but the blank space that shapes it. The Stoics knew this too. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, lived in a world of constant instability. He dealt with war, plague, betrayal. And yet his journals, meant only for himself, reveal a calm, restrained mind. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, he wrote. In other words, don't match rage with rage. Don't meet noise with noise. Meet it with stillness. The Stoics believed that emotion could cloud reason, and that speaking out in anger or ego was a form of weakness. They trained themselves to pause, to breathe, to master their internal states. Silence wasn't a retreat, it was a choice. A display of strength. It said, I am not rattled. I am not compelled to respond. I am in control. In a time where status and honor often depended on loud proclamations, the Stoics flipped the script. They saw silence as the highest form of discipline. The ultimate proof of power over oneself. Now, picture a historical powder keg, 1804, Haiti. A revolution explodes on the world stage. At the center of it stands Toussaint Louverture, a former slave turned general turned governor. But Louverture was not a firebrand. He didn't scream slogans or issue ultimatums. He maneuvered, diplomatically, tactically, and above all, quietly. He knew that France, Spain, and Britain each wanted a stake in the Caribbean, and he played them against each other with extraordinary finesse. He signed treaties he had no intention of honoring. He made promises he never voiced aloud. He knew that speaking too soon, or too loudly, would provoke overwhelming retaliation. So he cloaked his true goals, revealing just enough to keep others off balance. His silence wasn't absence, it was strategy. While others guessed, he acted. And by the time they figured it out, the game was over. Haiti was free. Silence has another master, Sun Tzu. In The Art of War, he doesn't just talk about battle tactics. He talks about psychology, timing, and perception. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, he advises. This isn't metaphor, it's methodology. Victory, to Sun Tzu, comes from shaping the battlefield before the battle begins. From misleading the enemy, masking your intent, and striking only when the outcome is already assured. And the only way to do that? Silence. A general who speaks too much reveals too much. A soldier who talks exposes formation, morale, weaknesses. In silence, you control the narrative. You decide when the game begins. You write the terms. And often, the war is won not with swords or bullets, but with the quiet before them. The discipline to say nothing until it is too late for the enemy to react. Contrast this with those who couldn't shut up and paid the price. Take Julius Caesar. Everyone remembers the assassination, the Ides of March, the betrayal. But focus on Brutus. He wasn't just a conspirator, he was the idealist, the philosopher, the moralist. After Caesar fell, Brutus didn't vanish into the shadows. He stepped up, delivered speeches, wrote justifications, tried to win Rome's soul with lofty ideals. He thought his words would clean the blood off the dagger. But Rome wasn't listening. While Brutus explained, Octavian, Caesar's heir, said little. He studied the chaos. He gathered power. He played the long game. And when he did speak, it was with purpose and force. Brutus died on a battlefield, his words scattered like dust. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. History remembers Brutus as a cautionary tale. Augustus. As the man who redefined empire. One talked. One ruled. French philosopher Jacques Derrida introduced the concept of deconstruction, the idea that meaning unravels the more you analyze it. It's not just an academic theory. It's a warning. The more you explain yourself, the more vulnerable you become. Words don't just clarify, they expose. Every sentence is an opening. Every explanation a crack someone else can pry open. And when you speak too much, you start doing your enemy's job for them. That's the trap of excessive speech. You hand your opponents the blueprint to dismantle you. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. He would have called it amateur hour. You never give away your position before the first move. If you must speak, speak to mislead. If you can't mislead, say nothing. Let's be real, shutting up isn't weakness. It's tactical restraint. It's the art of knowing when the room is too noisy for truth and too dangerous for honesty. Silence is a form of currency. The more you spend it, the less it's worth. Speak too often, and you become background noise. Speak rarely, and with clarity, and you become something else entirely, a presence. Someone worth listening to. Think about Steve Jobs. Not the myths, but the men. He didn't flood interviews with sound bites. He appeared rarely. When he did, every sentence was polished, powerful, productized. The silences between his words made the audience lean in. His restraint created gravity. His silence was not absence, it was control. Even rebellion, when done right, uses silence as a weapon. Look at the Black Panthers. Huey Newton didn't waste breath explaining injustice to the indifferent. He posed, dead calm, with a shotgun in one hand and a law book in the other. That image did what speeches couldn't. It bypassed debate. It declared presence. That photo wasn't just defiance, it was visual rhetoric. A calculated silence that forced confrontation. It made people uncomfortable. That was the point. Silence, when framed with precision, speaks in a frequency louder than words. It becomes an icon. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." But he also warned of the danger of noise, all the trivial chatter that drowns out clarity. In his view, the modern world was becoming too loud, too reactive, too distracted. People spoke not to express meaning, but to escape silence. And in that noise, they lost depth. Nietzsche's silence wasn't emptiness, it was space for thinking. For deciding. For becoming. In a world addicted to output, the one who abstains becomes sacred. Silence, in that sense, isn't just strategy, it's a form of transcendence. The divine doesn't explain itself. Back to Machiavelli, he knew all this, but even he slipped. After a career built on observation and manipulation, he made one critical mistake: he published The Prince. It wasn't meant for public eyes. It was a personal bid to get back into power, a job application for the Medici. But it leaked. And once it did, Machiavelli's brutal realism, his unapologetic tactics, his raw view of leadership, it all made him infamous. The honesty that made his book legendary also made him dangerous. Too dangerous. He knew the rules, but he underestimated the reaction. His exile wasn't because he was wrong. It was because he said it out loud. In the end, the master of silence got caught in the noise. But his ideas outlived him. Centuries later, power still echoes with his words. Lenin read The Prince. So did Napoleon. So do modern campaign managers, intelligence analysts, lobbyists. The smart ones, the real power players, don't yell. They don't grandstand. They don't chase retweets. They work in rooms with closed doors, no cameras, no microphones. They deal in whispers, in data, in timing. They don't need applause. They want results. They shut up, and they win. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the most precise thinkers of the 20th century, ended his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus with a line that seems simple, but isn't: whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. He wasn't surrendering. He was drawing the line between clarity and confusion. He believed that language had limits, and that going beyond those limits didn't create insight. It created nonsense. In other words, if you can't speak with exactness, don't speak at all. The same applies to power. Don't clutter your position with contradictions. Don't leak intent. Let your silence speak for your certainty. Even in art, silence holds power. The best directors know when to pause. The tension in a Tarantino scene often lives in the silence before the explosion. The best authors use white space to make readers breathe, think, anticipate. The best speakers know that a well-placed pause can land harder than any punchline. Presence doesn't come from filling time, it comes from commanding it. And nothing commands like silence that makes people wait, wonder, worry. Today, we confuse noise with relevance. We think volume equals victory. But every Machiavellian move says otherwise. If you're always talking, always explaining, always arguing, you're exposed. And the exposed don't win. They entertain. They lose. So what's the lesson here? Silence is a strategy. It's not about being voiceless. It's about being deliberate. Speak only when it moves the board. Stay quiet when the board is watching you. Let them guess. Let them project. Let them fear the unknown. Because in the end, winning isn't about who said the most. It's about who played the smartest. So, shut up. Win. And let the noise bury itself. This is the Beyond the Surface channel. Like the video, share it with a friend and subscribe for more videos about philosophy. Thank you for watching.